Okay, we are on the air. It is our February 18th work session. Counselor Coach Rabati will join us a little later. And I will turn it over to our Finance Director, Michael Osborne. And is he being joined by our City Attorney?
Our City Attorney will chime in, I think, when
Okay.
All right, hello, everybody. We're here to talk about solid waste, one of my favorite topics. I just wanted to thank the haulers for attending the meeting, and if there's any input or anything, questions that we have, they're here to answer. Kind of a recap that we've been doing for the last year. I'm going to recap some of the previous conversations that we had last year. Kind of point out some current language in the code, and then hopefully we can have a discussion and kind of a direction for us as a staff on where you want us to go on solid waste. Sorry, I was ahead. A summary of our previous discussions. So in February of 2015, Council approved the solid waste franchise agreement with a rolling 10-year period agreement. So every January, some point in January, it extends for a rolling 10-year period. From what I've seen, that's kind of I'd say it's a common thing in different cities around the region. I think these gentlemen could speak more to that. When we did this 10 years ago, there was 5 haulers in the city. Now there's 3, Waste Management, Waste Connections, and for a small part, Clackamas, I forget what their name is, but it's the 3rd one that services a small area in the east side of Milwaukie. In July and August of this year, we went through and reviewed our solid waste rates for FY25. Our outside consultant, Chris Bell, comes in and kind of does a study to summarize the rates to make sure that they're within average, I'd say, of other cities and that they seem comparable. And then in October of 2025 or 2024, we also did a study session where Metro came in and a lot of the haulers came and they discussed the solid waste system, recycling. I believe drop boxes were discussed there. So we kind of had like a little solid waste summit to discuss some of those issues. So I think this is just carrying forward those topics to give everyone a place to kind of say what they feel the future of solid waste is in Milwaukie.
Michael, can I ask, are you taking questions now or that?
No, at the end. I'm just kind of summarizing here and then
just a couple more slides.
yeah. I'm just trying to set the tone for where we're going. The topics that were raised in October were the franchise duration, the 10-year rolling agreement, food waste and compost. We pay, I believe, a little bit more of a premium to have that food waste compost component added. And the question was, do we continue with that or do we educate people on how to use that and let them know that that's an option? Customer service is a topic, recycle rates, and I think the percentage of, I don't know how to say this, but the percentage of things being recycled that actually get recycled.
The recovery rate?
The recovery rate. And then we talked about construction drop boxes within the city and who administers those. These are components of the solid waste code. I don't know if you want me to briefly go through and
I think just
highlight.
a couple points I'd pull out from this, and again, we had Justin's support in the production of this staff report, because I will own that when we first came, I think it was middle of last year, to talk about rates, we had a mistaken understanding of how our code read. We thought, oh, we adopted a 10-year agreement in 2015, 2025, it's up. we missed this part about the rolling piece. So we really wanted to make sure you guys saw the code and pieces. This is from our franchise term section of the solid waste code. So yes, it talks about, we started this in March 2015. What section B says, and that highlighted piece in green, is that the franchise should be considered a continuing 10-year term. 1st of January each year, it's renewed for an additional 10-year term unless at least 30 days before that 1st of January, you all notify the franchisees of intent to terminate. Upon doing that, that starts a 10-year clock. So that's not an immediate termination. It'd be 10 years then from that date. There wouldn't be any more rolling. A couple other pieces from this section of the code. We talked a little bit about this back in October. There was a clause about every 5 years doing a kind of more comprehensive review of the franchise system. I think in some ways we've done that in these sort of the summit that Michael was talking about in tonight. But one things I'd like to get direction on from you tonight is if there's more you want to see, more to kind of satisfy that agreement. We noted that didn't happen in 2020. There were a few other things going on that year, but I think that's something I would like to get direction on from you. And then D is about you can initiate proceedings to terminate the franchise system at any time. It doesn't have to be on that 5-year cycle. And then finally, this is kind of covered by the captions there, but a decision to terminate the franchise system does not affect the franchisee's obligations or rights under the current agreement. So again, if you make a decision to terminate, they get 10 years with these current standards to still be operating as a franchise in the city. And city attorney, did I get anything wrong? What I just said, okay?
So, I've just got 2 more slides real quick. So some information on other topics that we're looking at, going into FY26 coming up. We're asking that we have Chris Bell look at how food waste, composting prices affect our rates in the city. Kind of have him pull out that little section to give us a better understanding how much of our rates incorporate that food waste piece. For customer service, we had to update this. We had 2 customer complaints in the last 6 months. The mayor forwarded one to us today, so a third. I passed that along to waste management. I think that anytime something hits my desk for a solid waste complaint, I pass it along to them, and they've been very good at responding and getting in touch with the resident to find out the problem. So customer service is another piece that we keep an eye on, and if you guys hear anything, please feel free to email me to let me know so that I can let them know. But I think in this conversation, we can talk about how customer service is going and if there's any ideas that you have to make it better. The final thing is recycling rates and construction drop boxes. I think that this is kind of another hot topic in the region that I know the city of Beaverton had a discussion last month on drop boxes and opening additional franchises for that. Again, I think that these gentlemen could add more. I know David was there at the city of Beaverton council meeting, so maybe he can talk more about it. But they decided not to grant any more franchise agreements. I know that there's been discussion on that in the past, so if you guys wanted to talk about that more, we could. So kind of our questions that we have are, what questions would you like to explore going into the FY26 rate setting process? And what other actions do you want staff to see related to solid waste in the next year?
Can you go back to your slide that had 5 things on it? There we go.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a better way to
Sure.
address topics.
Yep.
Less, more focused. You sounded like you had something you wanted to.
Yeah, I had a clarification. If you can go back to the code, you mentioned in your framing that the 10-year rolling agreement is something that's common in other cities. Is that is it just a 10-year franchise agreement that's common, or is it that every year renewal is common as well?
I'm not an expert, but from the ones I've talked to, I believe Beaverton has it. Wilsonville, maybe? You guys know off the top of your head what other cities have?
We have the same agreement with Westland and Sandy, just our company, and I'm sure Dave has tons more examples.
We do, yeah, we have, let's say a handful of agreements that are, just like that, where they're rolling, 10-year agreements. Some I think are, rolling 7-year agreements, where they continue over. And we can, be more happy to explain why that, is the case or the reason behind that. And so the reasoning behind that is really because of capital investments with our industry. I mean, you really need to look at the solid waste business as a utility, and I think a lot of those cities do. So with the capital investments that are involved with our business, buying the assets, the trucks, we want to extrapolate those costs over a longer period of time if we can, which is beneficial to the ratepayers, because then those costs are lower on, every given year, the longer we can, extrapolate those costs out. And so that kind of helps with our assets, not only our trucks, but containers and carts, for example. It also helps us, if the city wants to explore new services, we can quickly pivot to make those investments and still have the time needed to, again, plan for those costs in this franchise setting. So hopefully that kind of, I don't want to get in too far into the weeds on it, but hopefully that explains it, at a high level. But it is, it's not uncommon to see those franchise agreements like that here in the Portland metro area. I think there's others throughout the state of Oregon as well like that too.
Thank you.
Is this just questions or?
Go ahead
Yeah,
with
it's
questions,
open.
yeah. Let's go ahead with questions that you
We
need as
go back to
background.
the top 5 there.
This one?
Yeah. So are there any franchise durations that are less than 7 years?
There are. A good example is, for example, the city of Troutdale, we just renewed that agreement. It's an 8-year contract. There's,
A fixed 8 years, not a rolling.
correct, yeah. There's, I just renewed 2 last year that are 10-year agreements in Yamhill County. But I know that there's, Washington County's a rolling agreement. Forest Grove is, I'm trying to think of one that has shorter terms, but I want to say Troutdale just comes to mind because we just renewed that at 8 years.
I thought it was going to be 7 year.
Oh, yeah, I think there is, if I recall, thank you, City of Gresham. We both, provide services in Gresham.
One thing we could take from this as additional work that we can do is maybe investigate just kind of what the regional cities have and put that together on the table for you all.
Well, and I did some of that back in October, which I sent you guys, yeah, there's some that are rolling like ours, but are shorter, 7 or 8 years. I like Oswego's, which is 10 years, assumed to terminate, or 10 years with the trigger to renegotiate at the 7-year mark. So that, again, they can have that assurance and it's not a sudden turnover, but it's not like in perpetuity. I have to say, when I saw this package and I saw my signature on that 2015 code, I was embarrassed and appalled, because I think it's a terrible policy. My only word in my own defense is I was only a month into the job, and I was the council president, and we were without a mayor, and that's why my name is on it. But I wanted to go back and watch the video, and unfortunately, those videos are no longer in existence. But I think this rolling term that makes us have to give notice 10 years out is just craziness personally.
So,
I will say though, that I talked with Rick Winterhalter at the county, who does this for the county and the unincorporated areas and Happy Valley and sort of coordinates with other cities. And he did say, you know, what we're hearing here, that it's not unusual in the metro area.
I asked, it was late notice this morning, but I did ask Rick if he had time to come, but he didn't today. But if there's any follow-up questions, I'm happy to follow up with him as well.
well, I acknowledge that, this to both entities benefit to have a multi-year franchise. However, I'm very familiar with capital investments and finances that revolve around corporations calculating their return on investments and how quickly they will pay off those capital investments. And I have never heard of 10 years being that the case. I remember quite well, you know, from my experience, my job experience, and I remember from my MBA class, it was the thing that professor beat into our head about getting these things paid off quickly. And it was always under 5 years, and most corporations were looking at 3 years. Okay? So I don't understand these 7, 8, 10-year paybacks, just from my experience.
Yeah, and if I can clarify too, it doesn't necessarily mean that we, you know, allocate those or depreciate those costs over the full 10 years. It might be 7 years, but then that still gives us that opportunity to reinvest in those assets, you know, over that 10-year period. So, but these trucks that we purchase are, just around 400? Yeah, they're $400,000 per truck.
It's a big investment.
It is a big investment.
Can I ask a question to the city attorney? We're talking a little bit about potential different durations, but is it correct to say that this council could make a decision to terminate the current franchise agreement, but that still then starts a 10-year clock? Could they make a decision now? Could this council make any decisions now about different durations of a franchise? Or would that be the council 10 years from now preparing for that kind of RFP process?
I guess it could break down a couple of different ways. The new term wouldn't be applicable to the current franchise. Right? So whatever changes you would make would become effective for the new franchise holders that would respond to RFPs and whatever solicitation mechanism you went through leading up to the expiration of the 10-year fixed-term franchise.
Which would be at its earliest January 2036.
I believe that's correct.
The only reason I asked that question is just, I think this is a good discussion about varying terms, but I just don't know how much control you all in your seats today have about the future duration of a franchise. Unless you could put that somehow into.
The code is quite specific, as I'm sure any of the other codes of other jurisdictions that have rolling agreements. If you did make a determination to terminate the rolling franchise system, it doesn't impact the obligations that the current franchise holders have under their existing franchise. So it just transitions to what would amount to a 10-year franchise, fixed term, which would be as if you were giving or granting a new franchise to the current rolling holders for 10 years. And then leading up to that point, you would need to decide what, or a subsequent council would need to decide what terms or what type of agreement you folks would like. That being said, the other option, of course, is putting an RFP out and negotiating new franchise terms with the new people who apply. Right now, this is, if you remember, we've had a lot of discussion.
In 10 years. years.
Yeah, in 10 years. We've had a lot of talk about like our right-of-way code, right? Well, the franchise code is essentially, it's kind of a similar system to the right-of-way code in that we wanted all of our users of the right-of-way to operate under the same terms. Well, the franchise agreements, there are no agreements any longer. The terms of the franchise are in the code. So what you did or what a prior council did in 2015 was designate franchise holders who were going to abide by the code. They then sent a letter of recognition that said, yes, we will be your franchise holder. And I think at the time there were 7, and I think through consolidation we're down to 3, right? And so if you were, after noticing and having a public hearing, were to determine, after that public hearing, you wanted to terminate the rolling franchise system, the 3 existing franchise holders would then transition to a fixed-year term.
I have a lot of questions because that's about as clear as mud to me.
Okay?
And so I'm going to give you a hypothetical so that I can understand this.
Sure.
Hypothetical being, okay, this council says, hey, we want to go to a 5-year rolling franchise agreement.
I don't believe we can do that because of the code that was passed in 2015.
Okay? That's question 1. Okay? So can we change the code?
Well, not with respect to the 3 current franchise holders.
So are we just stuck for the next
10 years.
Okay, that was kind of what I thought was the answer. I don't like the answer, but
Yeah. And that's just why I would love to talk more about length of franchises, but I don't know if it's a fruitful conversation when I don't think, unless you're gonna be around in 10 years in your seats, which would be great, I don't really know how much influence you'll have on the future duration.
My guess is back months ago, I also looked for the videos back in 2015 and found they were no longer, in fact, you and I spoke about it. My guess is, around that time, that was kind of the state of the art. That's kind of the movement that was happening, and I think a lot of jurisdictions adopted it. Sure, they might have landed 7, 8, 9, 10 years, but the idea of a rolling franchise agreement, I think, was an accepted practice. And different jurisdictions, as they considered the issues, adopted those codes. What's going to be standard of the art in 10 years? I have no idea. You could be putting out an RFP for, if you decide to terminate the rolling system, in 10 years, if that council decides to solicit new folks because those 10-year franchises are expiring, you might be back at the table negotiating with the same folks that are in existence.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
So is there a downside to starting the 10-year clock? Do we give a future council flexibility at that point? I mean,
Yes, we do.
you know, that council in, 2.5 election cycles at least can decide that, gee, we really love this thing, we're gonna do it again, or they can do something else.
Yeah.
But at least they have an option if we start the clock.
I tend to agree with you. We don't have to make that decision today because we have to make it by the end of this year. At this
Well,
point.
you can't make that decision today. You got to have a public hearing.
Okay.
So you will hear from all sides of the coin, from both the public and the industry side, and you'll have to make your decision after a public hearing, after notice.
Because because this code requires.
The
a
code
public hearing.
requires notice to all interested parties in a public hearing.
What if we revisit the code? What if we recognize that we're stuck for 10 years, but we just have a hearing on a new code? We're not having a hearing on terminating their franchise. We're having a hearing on a new code.
Well, that code would not apply to anybody because they have a rolling franchise agreement that's still in existence. So at some point, you would need to terminate the franchise agreement system, the rolling franchise agreement system. So it might be a fun exercise, but it wouldn't have any applicability to cancel the existing franchise system.
I think I'll offer too, I wasn't there 10 years ago, we don't have the recording, I can only read sort of the minutes and they're a little sparse. I mean, I have a feeling one reason this maybe happened too is in small cities, like I don't have staff that are solid waste experts. Mike's doing a brilliant job, but that's why we invited these guys, because we know there's gonna be questions you have about operations that we are clueless to. we are not, it's not one of our city utilities. We have to trust the experts. It's not, the good news is it's not a huge amount of work, you know, and we're not getting a ton of customer complaints. So it's little things, it's bulky waste day. I wonder if back 10 years ago, they were like, it's kind of working. It's not something we have staff. Do we just kind of do this for ease?
Well, 10 years ago, the city had an IGA and Rick Winterhalter came here and represented the county. And then the city hired, a few years after that, the city hired Reba, who was the franchise person. And so I guess terminated, I don't know. Well, that agreement with the county came to an end. The city had its own sort of franchise person for 3 or 4 years and now hasn't for 5 or 6 years. So
I mean, that and the pragmatic nature of the business. You know, historically, when I was a child, the garbage truck came down and took the garbage. Now, there's garbage trucks, there's recycling trucks, there's the refuse box, there's drop boxes, there's all sorts of things. So it's a lot more complex, a lot more investment.
I tend to agree with the two of you that that 10-year period is pretty troubling to me. When we have the public hearing, which it seems like we're leaning in that direction, I just really want to understand the consequences for ending. Like what that means for a partnership. Does that mean a lack of investment over the next 10 years? Does that mean that we're going to have, like how long before that 10-year period ends are we going to have that RFP? I like that like Oswego gives themselves a 3-year window. So just understanding those questions, I think we should move in the direction like y'all are alluding to giving that flexibility, but really understanding what the consequences are and the landscape that we set for a council in 10 years.
Cool question. Before you answer that, like obviously late to the party, are you talking about the 10-year, the length of the contract or the rolling part of the contract?
So if we give notice, we're giving notice that the contract would end. We're saying we're terminating the
You're
contract.
giving notice of a public hearing.
Sure.
At which you make a determination whether or not to end the system.
Okay.
But that's the rolling system.
Yeah, and I think what
It's
Councilor
the only
Anderson,
system.
I think what Councilor Anderson is saying is he would like to hear at that public hearing from parties, you know, what the trade-off is. So you get rid of the rolling piece. You get rid of the whole thing. I mean, we're basically a decision of just, are we renegotiating in 10 years, starting that clock now? That's something we would expect to hear in that public hearing from all parties.
And you may be in a situation in 10 years where you aren't really adopting the codes. You are just negotiating independent franchise agreements with prospective holders.
well, I mean, I think if it were terminated under this, then there could be the opportunity over the next 7 years to write a new code, right?
Certainly.
And to start negotiations 3 years before it expires or whatever. You know, I don't think anybody's advocating waiting to year 10 and then rushing or anything like that. But it does seem like such a hamstring on the council. It's just. Councilor Savage, you've been pretty quiet.
I don't like, as a matter of practice, policies that restrict the actions of future elected bodies. So that's just an overall, I think it makes it very difficult to make decisions, to legislate decisions, to respond to organizational change. I realize that there are benefits certainly for the franchisees and capacity benefits for the city. I totally understand that. I think that if we were to have some phrasing that allowed for the negotiation under the same terms, or, you know, something kind of along that line that would potentially make it easier for the, I imagine when the waste haulers are buying the trucks and buying all your capital investments, you know, you have loans, you have underwriting, you have insurance, you have all of that stuff. And if you have the assurance of these long-term contracts with the jurisdiction, then you get a better rate and you get more confidence in your lenders, which makes your job a lot easier. So that's not lost on me. But in general, you know, this body has term limits, it has turnover, and in 10 years,
Could be.
or 20 years, it's a totally different group. Whether or not we have the legislative history of this conversation or not, I hope that we do. But in general, I don't like policies that tie the hands of future bodies. I would be interested to hear a whole lot more in a public hearing, and I'd be really interested to hear what that cost benefit would look like. You know, if we were to make this change, how it would impact that bottom line in financing. That kind of information would be really helpful in making a decision, but I would want to have that, you know, heard in a public setting.
So I think I'm hearing some consensus around wanting to take the steps to do a public hearing and give formal notice of termination, potential termination. How the code is written, and again, Justin can correct me, you have until November 30th to have that, to make your decision on that. So it's not like this has to happen now, you know, because you've got the year. Do you have any direction to give us on timing? We will be, it's hard to believe it's almost spring, so we'll be embarking on the rate setting process with Chris Bell and with our haulers. And so I think my recommendation might be we get through that body of work and we revisit this in the fall, but I want to make sure that works for everyone.
That's fine.
If during that process, excuse me, there could be some attention paid to documentation for future conversations.
Sure.
You know, if we get through the public hearing and we decide, you know, actually, let's leave it for a future, you know, council to decide. I would really like to be able to leave them the time capsule of our best thoughts.
Yes, yes. That is,
Michael and I would love that too, but a lot of times we're like, what?
Yeah.
You connect the dots, so, okay, yeah. Great, and we can also do some more of that research, you know, Mayor mentioned she already did some, but I think we can get a more comprehensive view of what the whole region is doing in terms of solid waste.
Can I add one more thing? And I'm playing kind of devil's advocate here. 10 years ago in the city, there was 5 haulers, down to 3. I'm assuming it's very expensive in order to build a solid waste company. And my only caution is that I don't know how, if we put out an RFP, how many companies are going to come and solicit that and be big enough to do the work. Because in the last 10 years, a lot of these companies are consolidating and paring down. That would be my only caution of, I know that in the council 10 years, you want to give them the choice, the opportunity to have a choice. But in 10 years, there might not be a lot of choices available.
yeah, it's true. When we did this, I think it was 7 haulers, and they were a lot more mom and pops, and now they're big. And I did talk to Rick Quinterhalter about that. He said, yeah, you know, it used to be, there were small local companies. Now they're actually traded on the stock exchange, kind of big companies. And that's true across the region. So the number of people that might apply is one thing, and I take your point that it may just be the same people. But still, like, the process of having to revisit it on a regular basis and having a franchise term that has a fixed term and everybody knows you're gonna renegotiate it. I mean, it just seems, this 10-year rolling seems crazy.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the rolling just because I feel like it takes any leverage out of the hands of the city. And really, it's not handcuffing the council, it's handcuffing the public. Because it's the public that put us in these seats. So in a way, I mean, you're not just handcuffing the city council, you're handcuffing all the ratepayers. And based on Mayor Beatty's email and what she provided, we're like the highest charged city in the region for a lot of our garbage. So
We're gonna come to that, so about the rates, because that's.
there's a preemptive strike then, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, where does our leverage lie if we don't do this?
And I guess that is a question I'd love for us to consider in a hearing or have staff bring. Like, where is our leverage? What can we do in our existing rate setting process? What-
Which I think is a great segue into, I think we've got consensus on a fall hearing, we can put that on our forecaster. But let's move, can you go back a slide, Mike, to some of these other topics? So,
We got through one bullet.
it was the nastiest one.
Thanks, I didn't miss too much then.
So that second one, food waste and compost, I would pair that with our bulky waste day event, because we have been told before that those are the two things, those are the reasons why our rates are higher. When you look at the rates across the region, those are the two things we have that not every city has. So those are the things why our rates come out higher. Now, it's interesting because Wilsonville, which has the lowest rates, also has a bulky waste day. And I think they have both things, but they have only one hauler, and that hauler has a facility in Wilsonville, so they're not driving.
I was gonna say, for one day, we're paying the highest out of everybody
Well-
yearly.
It's really interesting, and I'm going off memory here, I did not go find the packets, but my recollection is when we started Bulky Waste Day, we were told it would be roughly 25 cents per month on everybody's bill. That's what it would cost us to do the Bulky Waste Day. We were told that the composting would just be cents per month on everybody's bill. And then last year, we heard it's like 70 cents or 75 cents or something. And I did run that by Rick at the county, and he confirmed that the difference between yard debris that's just yard debris and yard debris that's got food in it, the difference between the dumping tipping fees on that have changed dramatically. So food waste is costing us a lot more.
Much more.
Well, I don't remember exactly what the number that Chris Bell said,
I think it jives.
Yeah, 'cause
70
Yeah.
cents
Up
or
to a dollar
something.
more.
Because in
I
some
heard
cases,
$1.
Pardon?
I heard $1,
$1.
but that's ballpark.
in some cases, there's a difference of like 12 bucks between us and the next city, right? So that's where I'm kind of like, it's got to be more than just that. It can't just be the,
I do believe Bulky Waste Day is a significant contributor. We do, the 2 different days, in order to cover the whole city, and I do think that's been a big contributor.
you said 25 cents a month.
From hearing from them, it's the amount of trash that's collected every year continues to go up and up and up. I don't think that there's not a cap on what you can put out there. So I think that every year, the amount of, I'm assuming staff time and everything to pick up all that, right, expands.
Yeah, and one thing to just keep in mind, when it comes to the rates, it's hard because you're not always comparing apples to apples on the rates. There's different services in every different community that we service throughout the metro region. So if, for example, in Washington County, recycling is picked up every other week. Yard waste, food, compost is picked up every other week. That's not the case in other cities, for example, here in Milwaukie. So you really got to evaluate the services, and you also need to evaluate whether some of these cities and communities that you're looking at and the rates are a lot lower. They might, I would imagine they're probably most likely out of the metro region. The cities that are in the metro region, because of all the metro fees and taxes that we pay, the rates are higher. So if you look at the surrounding local areas, cities and communities, just keep those two things in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not looking at Washington County. What the mayor provided was cities here in Clackamas County, like West Lynn, and, Happy Valley, and some of the Oregon City, the unincorporated areas. That's where and the unincorporated areas are in our city. So that's where I'm like, there's multiple dollars of differences. So that's where I'm trying to figure, like, that's where to me, it seems like we're getting the short end of the stick, and the bulky waste day is 1 day, 2 days a year. And to pay for that dollar amounts more than other local jurisdictions. I mean, it seems a little bit,
I know that
Okay.
as we go into FY '26 rate comparisons, I mean, this is what we pay Chris Bell to do, to be an independent consultant, to look at the rates and to kind of analyze it. We can hone him in this year on having him like kind of pick out bulky waste day and food compost and what other different components we have, and have him add that, do more in-depth analysis on that, so he can kind of report back what the additional cost is to that and how that kind of compares to other cities.
that'd be great, because I'm having a hard time with putting together the extra 25 or 75 cents a month and that adding up to multiple dollars of differences between other jurisdictions.
In addition to asking Chris Bell to do that analysis, I do remember when this came up back in October, we talked about how, there's also a values and policy reason why you would do the food compost in the yard waste, right?
Right,
I believe previous Mayor Gamba championed it because of its ecological benefits. So is there other data you would need to consider beyond just the financial impact? Like, is this something where if it hits a certain financial threshold, you're ready to make a change, or are you gonna want, just so we can plan ahead, if you're gonna want further input from the community about the value of this, we should start planning for that now, rather than have to scramble to get you an answer on that in June.
Well, I'm not sure what you would have to do. I mean, I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand that. I agree, that's part of the public hearing process to get not only the dollars, but the values, surfaced. So I'm not sure what would be required.
yeah, okay, I believe we adopt our solid waste rates just by resolution. I don't think we do a full hearing on it, but there's obviously public comment. I guess, if I'm in your shoes and I'm saying, oh, okay, well, it does raise our rates by about $1. I kind of also want to know if we change this, how many people are going to come out and say, oh my gosh, I've been composting my food and I have to change my whole behavior. So I guess trying to get more information about how many folks are aware of this, how many folks utilize this.
Yeah.
Well, and I tried to get some info today about, was the unincorporated. I mean, I think everybody knows it's the right thing to do. It's to compost your food is the right thing to do for the climate and everything else. But I guess they're facing, that delta in costs is why, like for the unincorporated area, why the county hasn't gone there. It would be good to know, I don't know if we could find this out from Metro, or, it would be good to know if there's trending with more and more cities gonna do it. Will that bring down the cost? Is the cost always gonna be, is the delta between the two drop fees always gonna be so large or not? What's the, regional trends? I also just think truthfully, now that the people who do it, we're gonna have a problem. If we said no, our haulers would probably be hauling a lot of stuff to the McFarlands, or the people that take the dry, yard debris that is not
I think
appropriate.
it's a behavior change that's hard to go back from.
Yeah.
And do many people know? I didn't know that you could do this
Yeah.
until the
I didn't
last meeting.
There's also an education component.
It's funny because I have somebody who lives up on Lake Road. It's not happening anymore, but when we first passed it, I had someone who was living on River Road Apartments outside of Milwaukie who brought hers down and put it in. I guess she was all upset that they didn't have it. I'm like, you can bring it down and put it in mine.
I do think we could actually probably really easily do both some education and some data collection. I think we could do a little thing on Engage that's like, did you know your rates pay for you to put your food compost in here? let us know. Did you know this? Have you been doing this? And get you a little bit of data that might help when we get
And
to
as,
that.
this day, here's what it's costing you.
I think that would be really helpful. Same thing with the bulky waste days. How, I know people really enjoy that, but if we put up a cost comparison, if it truly is that expensive to do bulky waste days, I want to know how people would weigh those two, the benefit versus the cost.
So you said bulky waste day as well.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing that I'd want to really understand, as you're writing the climate impact statement for the staff report, how much of an impact does it make to compost your food? I just don't know.
That sounds great. That's great direction. Okay.
Customer service. I will say, I hear more customer complaints than you do, obviously, Michael. I get a few every year. Not terrible. I mean, it's certainly, and Rick Winterhalter will tell you that there's something that they do, there's a lot of pretty general satisfaction. But I do get more.
That was in 6 months.
Okay.
The third today, but if you do get them, or any of you get them, feel free to send them to me. The few that I have gotten, I've sent to both Waste Connections and Waste Management. And I try and follow up afterwards to make sure there's completion to it. The two that I got were addressed in a week's time. So I appreciate the communication that we have, and if there is a problem, their willingness to correct it.
So are you the designated POC for garbage complaints? Who is the POC?
Actually, it's a great question. Currently, it is Michael. This lies in our finance team. It's really a vestige of what the mayor was saying. We had a franchise coordinator who was in our finance team. We are doing an organizational assessment right now where we are asking questions all over the place. Does this belong here? Does this belong here? Like around bulky waste day, for example, a lot of the questions come to our public works team. And our climate and natural resources team. So we've got a bit of a many-headed monster with how we've been staffing this and trying to streamline that. But as of right now, Michael's my trash guy.
Now it's
An honor.
They're my trash guys. He's my trash conduit.
So you're saying if somebody calls the front desk, that gets referred?
That's how we have been. It's been very unclear, and Peter can attest, because he's been through 7, 8 bulky waste days now. Sometimes it was coming to city manager's office, and we have made a collective agreement because that wasn't serving us, that Michael, as the person who's a main relationship contact with the haulers, has become our point person for solid waste.
And I'm also trying to track complaints to see if there is a problem, or if there's repeated. If somebody doesn't get follow-up to it, I know the one that you sent today, they sent to Riley.
Well, they also said in it that they had tried for 3 times to get through to Waste Management.
Yes.
And got no response. So it wasn't just about the city, right?
I think that Dave can speak to that himself, is that they're more automated than it was. I know that the previous people had somebody stationed here in the city or somewhere near the city that you could call and get customer service to. Now they're based out of Phoenix, so you are dealing with a corporate conglomerate. I think that they're based more in technology than maybe phone, and maybe not everybody understands that. Did I miss anything with that?
No, thanks, Michael. We are leaning towards the technology side of things. So, something that we did last year, not just with the city of Milwaukie, but with most of our municipalities here in the Portland region, was if you go to our local website, wmnorthwest.com, and go to the Milwaukie page, any community member can put in an issue. And it creates a ticket. So if there's a hydraulic leak on the street, they can go there, submit a ticket, letting us know you have an issue, you have a truck issue. Please look into this, and then that triggers the action on our end. And as Michael, I know he's your trash guy, but we're also your trash guys too. Don't hesitate to reach out to us too directly. We're here to take care of those type of situations, but yeah, that's, certainly something that we're leaning on the technology side of things. Yes, we still need to answer the phone and take care of our customers that do call in. We acknowledge that too, and take care of these type of situations that come up.
Well, I appreciate everybody wanting to do a good thing, and I appreciate the mayor wanting to solve these problems. But we just need one button, somewhere that says, here's where you call for complaints. And it's not, well, gee, I'm gonna call the finance, or maybe I'll call waste management.
Yeah.
I mean, it just needs to be,
Yeah.
one entry,
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I will say we worked really collaboratively with the haulers this year because in past bulky waste days, it's been a mess. It's been third of the calls come to finance, third come to public works, third go directly to them. They were great and we were all connected. It's going to them. It's going to them. It's going to them. One number. We did get a few calls, but it was so much less than previous years and they responded brilliantly. So thank you guys.
I would like to say that last year's bulky waste day, I felt like it really was, it improved in terms of the communication with customers. So fingers crossed that's going to happen again this year too.
Keeping an eye on time, we probably should talk about these last two.
Which are kind of related. So the recycling rates is really about the construction drop boxes. It's not about the recycling containers. I don't know if anybody else watched the Beaverton hearing, but I did, or I listened to it while I was doing other stuff. It was interesting because Mr. Garrett, who has come here to talk to us, really did the full court press in Beaverton. Like we had neighborhood associations, people supported him, and the Beaverton City Council still voted 6-0 to deny his request for service. And some of the folks here testified at that. I think, so I'm not inclined to go back down to retread that path. But I do think something we could ask for, so the Beaverton staff kind of took some questions from their council about things they would try to work into their next year of, I guess they're on a rolling contract, but next terms. And I do think maybe publicizing the recycling rates or the lack of recycling rates of the drop boxes, just having more awareness, us having more awareness and us making the public have more awareness of what those recycling rates are, where people are taking their dumpsters and what the recycling rates are. I would just like to have more data on that. I feel like, the whole thing of, and apparently, the comparison that Mr. Garrett gave was 4% at Metro South and 50% at his place. But apparently a lot of the others are sort of in between, like Metro South is kind of the worst because they don't have the space to actually take apart the loads and do more recycling. And I mean, they call it dry waste. So, right, we're talking about typically construction.
Yeah, we actually
construction waste.
went to his facility.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do you have anything to tell us from
Yeah,
that?
it's really cool, and I mean, I would love for us to consider using them, just because, and I relate this to climate change, climate action, everything we're doing. It's like, we're either one foot in and then another foot out, because we don't do quite everything we can be doing, right? And I feel like this is something that we could do, is only limited to construction waste, but and this is the conversation I had with Emma this morning, a lot of times it's not, it's who pays for that waste? Who's paying for it? It's mostly contractors, developers, right? Because they're the ones building these properties, right? It's not usually homeowners that are tearing down a wall to expand their, I mean, they can, but that's not what we're seeing right now. Right now, we're seeing a lot of construction being done by the developers, right? So I would assume that that's who would pick up the bill, if I'm mistaken, I might be mistaken. But my whole thing is that if we're gonna go into climate, then we should look at things like that, which I consider low-hanging fruit, that would make a difference, right? So I would like to see us at least consider it and look into it, because the rates are pretty dramatically different. I mean, even if they come in the middle, you're still talking about at least 20% difference. And if we're gonna be as climate conscious as we say we are, then we should stick to that.
I think of this a little bit like a bulky waste day or a compost. It's a nice thing that we could add on. If we're gonna hear about it, I wanna understand what the cost is to the system. And related to your question, Councilor Sarvati, like who is paying what? If it is a dollar rate increase shared across the board, I'd feel different than if it is a dollar rate increase on commercial payers. So just understanding that, it's beyond me right now, but that would be helpful if we do consider that.
I
Well,
didn't think
and
it's situated
drop
like that,
boxes
but
have
yeah.
their own rate, so
Right,
it's
exactly.
not, it shouldn't be affecting the monthly rate of regular rate payers. They have
And that's
their
kind of
own
my
rate,
point.
But how it would affect those rates.
I'm sure majority of people that are buying those drop boxes or paying for them are probably contractors, developers, you know, so whose bottom line are we really hurting?
Justin, I have one more code question. Sure. As they're considering, you know, whether or not there is something to explore here, our understanding, I believe, is that this would be adding a franchisee to do this work. Does our current code allow for the adding of a franchisee?
Well, yes, the code outlines some considerations that you need to make, one of which, of course, is it a service that current franchises can do? And there's a variety of other considerations outlined in the code. I would say that you would be adding a franchise, not a franchisee, right? Because it would become a franchise that would be subject to however you determine you're going to move forward with the franchise.
I do suggest you listen to the Beaverton one. I mean, there was a lot of testimony there about the ability of haulers to provide the service, and because the existing haulers could provide the service, they didn't feel that they could go that route. I mean,
But
And I
they
guess-
provide the service at a worse recycling rate. That's the point.
This is also something that
but
I don't know if
we're
we-
under that 10-year agreement, right? We're
Yeah.
kind of hamstrung by our 10-year agreement.
And I don't know if we have to figure an answer out today, but I would love, if we do talk about this, for staff to bring us some answers on these things. Because I'll just be candid, this is going above my head a little bit. So understanding what we would be allowed to do, what we have to take in consideration would be helpful. And even a summary of the Beaverton situation.
Certainly, I mean, I don't know, certainly we can tell you what the code allows you to do. I think in terms of the dollars and cents of it all, we would probably need to, I don't know whether Chris Bell can help us with something like that. I don't think we have folks on staff that are able to digest that material, but
I can see our invited hauler guests clamoring to try to get in there. It is 5, and so we can allow them to speak, Mayor, or we can ask that they send in their comments in writing if you'd like.
Well, since they're here, I think I told staff I thought this should have been on regular session because we're taking public testimony when we didn't take public testimony last week at our work session, at our study session. But since they're here, let's let them talk.
I'll be quick, thank you, Mayor May. I was there at the city of Beaverton, a few weeks ago when I was one of the presenters for that, of course. And, I'll just say, ultimately, like you said, Mayor, it was voted down unanimously by the city council, for, a handful of reasons, which, if you watch the video, you'll see. I think Councilor Duggar really said it best at the council meeting. He really shared that we have relationships with the 5 existing haulers. If we have issues or if we have concerns, let's work with those haulers that we have the relationships with before we start breaking things apart and adding new people into the mix. If they owe it to the haulers, and we're working together. And I felt like that was, certainly, something it resonated well. If you as a city want to look at higher recovery rates that might take these trucks farther to get to, and there's costs implicated, I don't want to speak on behalf of both the haulers, but I think we would both agree, we will do that as long as everybody understands there are costs associated, like you said, Counselor, about, the contractors, there might be higher costs, but we're willing to look at that and explore those opportunities as your existing haulers. So, John?
Yeah, just real quick, when you speak, would you mind, A, if you could come to the table, but B, or pass the mic, can you say your name for the record?
Pass the mic. Pass the mic.
So who you with?
Yes. Dave Huber with Waste Management, Public Sector. Josh Brown, Hoodview Disposal and Recycling. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll keep it quick. I know you have a lot on your agenda. Just a couple of things to add to what Dave said, and I hear all the concerns of the council, especially when it comes to diversion rates. We can honestly take the material anywhere that the council designates to take it to, right? I think some of the biggest concerns that we've heard, even with our rates, do with Metro and their increases annually that we have no control over. And so I think that's created a lot of challenges with municipalities and cities where it looks like the haulers are, continuing above those operating margins when we're not. Those are out of our control. So I think the continued discussion with the council and members of the community, we can certainly work towards improving those diversion rates. At the end of the day, it does come down to that particular facility, and I'm glad to hear you toured their facility and what they can do and what they can perform, right? And every facility has outputs and different capabilities based on space and equipment and all that. So certainly willing to continue to look at those and do what we can to increase those numbers, whether it's at the curb or in drop boxes. So.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave and Josh, and I think then I'll take on, we also asked Chris Bell to look at the food waste and the compost, the bulky waste in terms of impact on rate studies. Would you also like us to look at, if there was requirements for taking things to a certain facility or a facility based on a certain recovery rate, like that would be the rates?
Yeah,
We can do that. The last thing I'll say, and I am not the, but I do recall hearing and talking about this with Mr. Garrett, that standardization of how those recovery rates are recorded is not great. So perhaps the state could work on creating a standard so there is better understanding across these facilities, and it's not trusting that 50% versus that 4% that they're using the same scale.
I do think, he has been pressuring Metro on that score, I believe, trying to get there. I don't know if Metro's actually doing anything to do that, but, there was some implication in some of the conversation by Beaverton staff that Metro was looking at some of that, so I guess, yeah. Okay, I think that's it for this topic.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Turn it over to Laura, Michael, and Kira to talk about neighborhood hubs.
Josh, thank you, Counselor. Yes, reach out if you have any questions. See you. Happy to see you.
Hey, nice. That sounds like pretty good. Oh, I've heard about this town.
You have many nameplates to pick from.
We got a good squad running in too.
Scott will get you them. Scott will get you the right ones. I think you all know who we are.
I would hope so.
It better be by now.
You're working.
Hello, everyone. We're here to continue the conversation about hubs. Okay. So we were back here in November, and we talked. I can't believe it was November. Last year we were here, and we talked about various aspects of Hubs Phase 3, so the continuation of the Hubs Phase 2 project that we finished up over the summer. And we talked about a proposed approach. We had a great discussion, and what was reflected in the staff report and in our conversation today is sort of a new approach to this, to Phase 3. And what we've identified is a tiered approach to Hubs refinement planning from lowest level of effort to the highest level of effort. So I'm going to start with tier 1. Several tasks that are pretty straightforward, generally will only require staff time, not additional funding, except the expanding the business improvements citywide, but there's plenty of money for that, so.
Plenty of money, no lights.
As we outlined in the staff report, we talked about this idea of these accessory commercial units throughout the city, but we also discussed that there seemed to be a general consensus of this alternative idea of expanding the city's home occupation code. Already exists. Let's take a look at that code and can we refine that? Generally, right now, our current code wants home occupations to be pretty much invisible. And they can't change the character of the neighborhood or produce additional traffic, pedestrian or vehicular, signage is really limited, et cetera. So what we are proposing as part of this is an audit of our home occupation code, and are there ways that we can stretch that a little bit and provide some room for some expansion, allow some more commercial forward uses to be permitted in the neighborhoods. We did hear from some of the NDAs that they don't have a lot of commercial activity happening, and they don't have any kind of hubs right in their neighborhood. An expansion of the home occupation code might be able to fill some of those gaps and provide also some opportunities for small businesses to kind of start out of their house, but something that's a little more commercial forward, as opposed to someone who has a home office and does taxes or something in their home office. So we're proposing to review the home occupation code to ensure that home-based businesses can thrive in our residential areas. And we would look at things like allowed business types and standards, some performance measures of appearance. Is there a way that we can kind of pull that and do a little bit more with that code? And we would, of course, use Engage Milwaukie, talk to our MBAs about what are folks comfortable with seeing sort of happen throughout their residential neighborhoods. We talked a bit about identifying things that respond to gentrification and anti-displacement. And so there was some discussion about bringing in some speakers to talk about how can we make sure that we're not treading into that as we're trying to open up some of our neighborhoods for some more commercial activity. And then the final task was talking about funding to catalyze some change. So again, the home occupation code, and really look at doing some education so folks know what is allowed now, and see while we're doing kind of the code audit. That's some low hanging fruit that we've talked about, kind of what is an easy thing that we can do to get the word out that folks might want to start a business in their house. And back to kind of this idea of marketing and promotion. What's already allowed, what is already possible, again, with the home occupation code, as well as our temporary uses. As part of the Hubs Phase 2 project, we expanded a bit in the existing temporary use process to allow more things to happen as temporary uses. So we want to really take advantage of doing some marketing and promotion as we're coming into spring, just kind of crazy, it's already there, and have folks think about some pop-up activities and pop-up events to try to pilot some ideas and do those as a temporary use. So we would like to take a look at our temporary use program and see does the way we actually process the requests, does that still work for folks? But really getting the word out and letting people know that they can do more things. And then finally, this idea of funding. So the idea of citywide business improvement grants, as well as some placemaking efforts in the public right of way. So bike racks or benches, banners, that kind of thing, to invest a little bit of money in some of our in our business areas to kind of get some little more excitement and some more activity in some of our neighborhood areas and in our commercial tier 2. So the hubs and the hub areas that we've identified. And in this second tier, we want to talk about the hubs that we have identified that we've already changed code for. Some of these tasks might require some consultant services, and they are likely to be slightly larger efforts. So we rezoned many of the hubs to that small mixed-use zone back in the summer. And we notified business and property owners that these changes in the zoning are happening. What we'd like to do is to do additional outreach to detail what is allowable under that zone and really target folks that are in those hub areas. These small mixed-use zone really generally only include 1 or 2 properties. These are really, really small areas. So dramatic changes are probably unlikely in these areas. Infrastructure improvements are in process in some of these locations or identified in the near future, which signals that the city's investing in these areas. So we've got some stuff following the zone changes that we've done. The city can build on the rezoning and those infrastructure improvements by encouraging businesses to apply for grants through Joseph's program, and to expand that grant program for private property or through right-of-way improvement requests for those place-making ideas. So this is an effort that can help start, maybe get some more activities happening in these small hub areas. So that small mixed use area, the Roswell Market, Sunny Corner Market, and the Little Blue Market on Washington Street. So they all have that small mixed use zoning. And then we have the neighborhood mixed use hubs, so the NMU hubs. So we upzoned a couple of areas. So the Trolley Trail Hub is one of those. It's already a pretty active hub. Several businesses in place. They're right on that visible spot of the Trolley Trail. It attracts people from Milwaukie and the region as they're walking or biking by. So some small placemaking improvements could spruce up that hub and indicate to people that the city is interested in promoting that area as a walkable and bikeable area in the city. Businesses, again, could apply for a business improvement grant where the city can invest in some attractive, maybe some streetscape measures like banners or modest wayfinding signage, bike racks, that kind of thing, to kind of pull people into that area. And then we have the hubs with greater potential. So first, and so we're still in this tier 2 area. So we have the 32nd Avenue corridor, and so what you see here is the zoning of the 32nd Ave corridor that's currently zoned NMU. There's a little tiny pocket of high-density residential up in the north, but it's surrounded by RMD, or that moderate density residential zoning here. So again, located at 32nd. The hub itself is 32nd and Olson, but it's part of a corridor, NMU hub. And it's been zoned. The NMU zone there on the corridor has existed since 2015.
Call 32nd and Olson the hub.
Well, that was identified as part of the phase 1 hub was 32nd and Olson, that area where the coffee shop is and so on. So that kind of, that intersection was, the whole thing is the corridor, the NMU is a corridor, but the hub was identified as that corner, as that sort of that intersection of businesses.
And it's been zoned as neighborhood Main Street, is that?
That was the way back, yes, yeah. We're in the way back machine for that one. That was that original study.
So I thought
that
the whole
PSB
area was the
yeah.
same. I don't think of one part of it as.
Yeah, just because of the
Milwaukie
different
Cafe
businesses, the
kind of,
Milwaukie Cafe is kind of sort of the.
That's what the community
center of there.
identified as
Yeah.
the hub, even though
Yeah.
the corridor's been zoned that way.
The corridor itself does have some challenges. There's relatively low population density around that corridor, so it does make commercial viability challenging. Narrow sidewalks with obstacles like mailboxes and utility poles and so on in there as well. There is a lack of on-street parking. The 32nd Ave, the right-of-way itself is limited. So there isn't a lot of room there. The vacant site at 32nd and Olson, when it redevelops, part of the redevelopment plans that we've seen is they're actually giving up some property so they can have some on-street spaces on 32nd Ave. So we don't have a lot of right-of-way opportunities there. It's pretty limited. There is an existing frequent transit line though on 32nd. There's the planned, the 29th Ave bikeway. So we have a parallel bikeway to 32nd. That's going to continue through Hillside and connects to the spring water. And then, of course, the redevelopment of Hillside, which is just to the south, will bring hundreds of people. So there's some opportunity here for the corridor, but there are some challenges to the
So,
corridor itself.
But I mean, does the edge of it go to Hillside?
No, it doesn't. No, it ends.
There's like
North of
two
that.
blocks or
Correct.
something between it and Hillside?
Yes, yeah. And one of the things that we brought up that we bring up in the staff report is that it's not identified as a hub, but there's the intersection of Harrison and 32nd, kind of south of all this, right in central Milwaukee. So it's kind of a hub for central Milwaukee, that key intersection there. And eventually, the Murphy site may redevelop into something will be happening there. So we've got there's some opportunities that could impact in a positive way the 32nd Ave corridor because of the activity that's happening south of it. So, so there's some things to look at for that 32nd corridor as well. And then we have the what we're calling the Central King Road Hub and Corridor. Because if you think about, so the sort of the 42nd and King Road hub area where the Safeway is and all of that is in the middle of this long corridor area where you have the Wichita Center and so on at Linwood, and then you have the Central Milwaukee at Harrison and 32nd on the other end. And so this sort of the Safeway hub is in the middle, and it kind of connects these two other areas. So that King Road corridor, and then Harrison as well. It's really very well located in the middle of these two pretty big regional kind of commercial areas. It has an arterial street designation, of course, and we have the King Road Improvements Project that's in design. So there are a lot of opportunities for that area. It also it benefits from the NMU zoning, and it has RHD zoning already around it. There's certainly more than on 32nd, so we've got some of the density available there from a zoning perspective on that corridor as well. So it's really well positioned, I think, in between those two areas. And again, pedestrian and bicycle improvements that are going to be as part of the King Road project. And then TriMet is studying the feasibility of upgrading the frequent service line to an FX Express line as well. So there's a lot of opportunities. But before we do some of these corridor studies, we think that we need to really understand the conditions necessary to get some redevelopment happening in those two hubs. And we think that a thorough market study is necessary that talks about economic and zoning analysis. It talks about does the current zoning and surrounding zoning support the redevelopment along those corridors? Is there enough density to make commercial development viable in those hubs or financially feasible? And if not, what zoning changes might be necessary to support that? Transportation and public investments, what would need to occur both along and even adjacent to those corridors to make these thriving commercial corridors over the next 20 years. I mean, this is a long outlook. It's not something that happens in the next 18 or 24 months. And then communications and messaging. Why is the city considering a corridor analysis? What is the long-term vision for the corridors? These are all things that we need to talk about and then communicate out to the public, of course. What are the goals of the analysis? What are we trying to achieve? So there's a lot of public engagement that needs to happen as part of this to try to share kind of what are the goals and what are we trying to achieve with these corridors. And then tier 3, so this is a lot of effort, big project here, but it's looking at the high density zone, the residential high density zone, and an analysis that does a couple of things. With the idea being that we're increasing the zoning capacity in the high density zone to allow for more housing. It's something that's required in our housing production strategy, so we have to do this. But residential density supports commercial activity, so doing this zoning analysis does a couple of things. It gets us to what we're looking for in our housing production strategy, but it also will support or help to support our hub zones or our smaller commercial areas as well. Will increased density be sufficient to spur the redevelopment, or do we need to do other things like For example, parcel aggregation is one of those things. And in looking at our housing capacity analysis, our high-density residential zone has been developing at far lower densities than is allowed by code. So we have a lot of untapped potential in there, in the zones.
Can you repeat that last part, Barry? I'm sorry.
The high-density residential zone has been developing at below what is
Okay.
allowed for zoning. So we're below.
Substantially.
Yeah. So the current zoning allows a minimum density of 25 dwelling units per acre, a maximum of 32. But I think what we're seeing around the Safeway hub area is around somewhere between 8 and 10 dwelling units.
You're
per acre.
seeing redevelopment
That,
there?
no, that's what there is right now.
Oh, that's existing.
Yeah, yes.
I'm told that the Derringers have been coming in regularly to meet with you about redeveloping some property.
Well, they have a couple of triplexes, under permits right now, just adjacent
Just
to their
triplexes,
area.
nothing
Yeah.
more dense than that.
Not yet. No, not that I've heard. I haven't spoken with them yet, so we'll see. If they're watching, give me a call.
Well, and
Let's talk.
today we're gonna remove the, presumably, the
Maximum
end
density.
of the.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. And then the housing production strategy also talks about increasing allowable densities in our high density zones to give developers options of building more units in those zones. So we want to increase density that either evaluating increasing allowed density. We want to look for opportunities to rezone more land, to pull those into those high density areas. Are there opportunities to support redevelopment on underutilized parcels? Are there some bonuses that we want to talk about for, FAR bonuses or that kind of thing? So we would need to begin scoping that work in the spring to get that going. But that zoning around the hubs, that RHD zoning around the hubs will be part of this citywide analysis of RHD. So as I said before, it would be doing a couple of different things for us. Yeah. So the overall, we have an approach to the projects that we would like to suggest, and Laura is the planning manager who's in charge of our work plan.
Yes.
Approach.
So I wanted to just say thank you all for talking to us about this last time. And I hope
Yeah.
we've kind of captured what you all brought to us last time and that we've been able to turn it around and turn it to something that we all can kind of all see the merits of. And so the way that I'm looking at it, and I was looking at both your goals and our work plan and what's kind of the requirements and trying to think about the different types of projects. And as far as these projects go that we've just talked about, I think the order of them, we talked about them in tiers from, lowest level of effort to highest level of effort. But I think the order that we need to tackle these in, and this is completely up for discussion, is we've got to do the residential high density zoning study. That's required. That's a given. We have to do that. It's required by the state. We have to do it this year, which I think is great because we're doing it. I mean, remember the RHD isn't just around the hubs. We've got lots of RHD in our town center. We've got it in lots of different places. So we've got to do that work. And so we need to scope for that and get that going. But what we can't do is have there be a specific kind of like, maybe kind of sub-analysis of what would take around the hubs to make something change in those areas. So that's first what we need to do. I think that scoping, at least scoping the 32nd Avenue and King Corridor market analysis is something that we could work on. I think that there is the potential to go for a grant, through Metro 2040 program. I think that they are particularly interested in jurisdictions looking at how they can implement the 2040 plan. And 32nd and King Road are corridors, they're identified corridors. And so I think that just scoping what that would look like could be something that we could do in 2025 with the idea that we would get a grant and then we could do the actual analysis in 2026. And then we would have the results of that, later in 2026. And then maybe we turn that into an actual corridor study in 2027, because it kind of is going to take those steps to get there, I think. Then looking at marketing what the zoning currently allows, we can market those things like the trolley trail hub and the standalone hubs. We can do the marketing just in between doing other things, right? This isn't a big project for us. We'll put it on our burner and we will pull it out when we've got some free time. We'll set up a work program with set and kind of, that can be a slow roll to get that done. It doesn't require much.
Well, is that even a planning function, or is that?
It is a team effort.
An
Well,
engagement team and with.
It's education.
It's
Yeah.
education, and it's really kind of like, what changed in the zoning? How are we gonna partner with you as economic development, and then using SET to help us tell the message. So it's kind of a group effort, that planning, we would all do it together,
We
I
tell them
think.
what we want to say and then they'll make it
And then
sound
they'll make it
really-
sound
look
good.
really cool.
Well, and all the questions that then come from the great marketing go to you guys.
Right.
I mean, okay.
Exactly, yeah. So that's something that we can do fairly easily. And obviously, we talked about the potentially expanding the business improvement district, the grant program, sorry, and the CET funds for placemaking. And obviously, that's Joseph's not planning. And then the home OC code is also another thing that we can kind of like run under the radar. At some point, we'd have to amp that up because we want to do some public engagement, but that's something that we can handle as staff. And so that's kind of the way that we see this working, moving forward, and wanted to kind of just pitch that to you all and see if that was in alignment, kind of what you all are thinking, if we captured everything that we talked about last time we met with you, and make sure that we're on the right track. And so I guess with that, I'll open it up to see if you'll have any questions for us. Yeah, and Joseph, yeah.
Two things. It says potentially for expanded business improvement programs citywide. That is gonna happen. It's just a matter of hiring our next person, so I can do that. And then the CT funds to placemaking, I think I'll need to have a little more conversation with y'all about what that could be, what that means, but that would also be my daily week.
Is that the business improvement program, is that the citywide grants? We not doing that currently?
We only have, the scope right now is only for the URA.
We just haven't had staff capacity to expand it beyond that. So when Joseph gets his economic development coordinator up and running, they will take over the administration of the URA, which then allows Joseph to update the materials and begin the notification to citywide folks.
We talked about it, but.
We've
we
received the
didn't-
direction from you,
I
we
got
just
it.
haven't been able to implement.
So I was confused. I was like, okay, so we talked about that.
So just, I wanted to answer that question before it was asked. And then finally, I just want to give a major kudos to both Laura and Vera. They have done an incredible amount of work gathering all of these ideas that I've had, you've all had, and putting into something that is meaningful and I think reasonable for the staff to fulfill. So I just thanks for organizing our.
You've been right there with us,
Yeah.
organizing
Yes.
with us.
You keep coming to those meetings I keep scheduling, so yeah.
Great job.
So I got a question this, I'm trying to understand the relationship between the first and second bullet. And so, obviously we know that the study has to be done by state law. And, so you have to have the final result before you can move to the scoping or the,
Well, these are two different areas. Well, I mean, they overlap, but they're two different areas.
in trying to determine the economic viability of these hubs, is the zoning study going to inform that, I guess, is my question.
I think the zoning study will inform that to a certain extent, because I think one thing that we're trying to understand is we have zoning already in place in the RHD, right? But it's not producing what we want it to produce, right? And so we've got a problem there. So just having the zoning and having the densities and setting the bar higher doesn't mean that we're getting anything. So I think that when we do the analysis of the RHD, it starts to tell us why aren't we getting anything? Is something else, do we need to be doing something more to that zone to pop it? Or is that zoning within itself not enough? Do we need to look at rezoning some of the RMD to RHD in order to make that happen? Do we need to think about it? And a lot of the problem, I think, too, is with the RHD across the city is that we have really small lots. It's hard to get them redeveloped. So what kind of strategies might there be to try to get some of those parcels brought together to do something bigger? So I think that, and I don't know all the answers to the question, Councilor Massey. I think that's why I'm interested in seeing what the study will show us. But I think it will start to inform how we can open up the zoning a little bit and maybe start to get a little bit more. And that will help us, because if that's never going to turn over, if it's going to continue to be what it is now, then we're not really going to have the densities, I think, that are required for anything else to happen. So it's kind of like, we've got to do a little bit here with the RHD and then possibly do a little bit along the corridors to figure out what we want to do as well to get that supported. And I don't know, Joseph, if you wanted to say something there.
I think it's a good question, Councilor Massey. I'm leaning in because I know the microphone's in there, so. Okay, thanks. I think your point is well taken in the fact that there's 2 points, right, in this. There's the housing production side of it, and there's what creates the market for what we're actually talking about, which is the hubs tonight. I definitely see them being connected and should be part of the whole conversation, and not separate. So.
Yeah, I think they're connected too, and it's sort of the classic chicken and egg question here, you know? You know, I guess I'm a linear thinker and I want the one to come for the other, so it's clear to me, but I'm not sure it is, so.
We struggle with that exact same question because I'm a linear person too. I was like, I want to do this and then we do that. I was like, no, I think this is kind of all wrapped up.
Yeah.
But then there will be like another layer to the market analysis that we probably won't get to in the RHD analysis.
Yeah, I don't know the market analysis necessarily tells us that we shouldn't do higher density for housing's sake, but it'll definitely inform how it will help the economic development side of things.
I mean, won't the outcome of the high density and any rezoning we do from that, won't the market analysis make more sense after that?
Yeah, that's what we're suggesting. Yeah.
So not till
It'll build on.
2026, not till 2026 then.
Right, we're saying that we could scope it and go for a grant, and then we will have hopefully gotten, I mean, we still have to scope the high-density residential study as well, so we'll kind of do those maybe at the same time, and so kind of filling in the gaps, but yeah, so we have to do them both, but we're gonna do the RHD first because we have to. Then we will start working on the scope for the second tier of it and try to go for a grant. So that all will take a little while because if we want to get a 2040 grant, which I think is a good prospect, then it will naturally take probably a year before we have anything.
Be next winter,
Yeah,
funding cycle.
yeah, that's my guess. Yeah.
So can I clarify? You're saying study RHD this year,
Yes,
scope the hubs conversation and go out for that grant this year, implement RHD in 26.
let's not get, that's being pretty aggressive, actually, because I think that's a good question, though, because I'd like to say yes, but I know that I haven't scoped the RHD study, so I still have to do that. So I have to do that first, and then I have to go out and find a consultant, and then I have to hire them to do the work.
Yeah.
So that's gonna take probably a good chunk of this year, I would say. So, yes, so it's not lining up like I would like it to. So-
Already.
Already it's not lining up. So we're just saying, I think mostly that we would get the study for the RHD and hopefully get that underway. And then as soon as we have that underway, and then on the heels of that, we would start scoping the market study. And then hopefully we can build off of that. So it's not maybe 2026, we start the scope for, we start the market analysis. Maybe it's a little bit delayed based on how far we can get with the RHD. It's imperfect.
I do appreciate, though, I think it makes sense to start with the RHD, move into the hubs conversation. Thank God for state law that it solved that chicken and egg problem, that we have a spot to start.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd just be curious to see, I think about, in RHD, you talked about combining lots and different approaches. I think about some of our other housing production strategies being rolled into this as well. Like I could see land banking to encourage development in our RHDs being a valuable strategy to get development done. Land banking is a whole separate conversation, but wrapping all of that other housing production strategy, what does our affordable housing code do to our RHD? I think understanding all of that and seeing especially with this affordability goal that we have. I guess this is the overlap between affordability and economic development, but how does that housing production strategy kind of play out would be helpful to see. Does that make sense?
It makes sense in that we'll see how it plays out when scoping it'll be interesting, right? Trying to bring in all of those elements, thinking about economic development, that's kind of like one piece that's over here, but then what are all the other things in the HPS that we're trying to accomplish as well? And how can we talk about those things as part of the RHD study? Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah. The other thing that I want to add, I do like that we're talking about RHD in connection with hubs. I think that like people naturally in the city can sometimes prickle up about a new density, but I think people are very excited about this idea of hubs and commercial activity. It's hard to have one without the other. And so when I think about what areas in town are most palatable for folks to have more density, tying it to our hubs or downtown, having that
Yeah, I
buffer
look
zone.
at this map all the time. I'm like, where is the RHD? Right? It's right around downtown and then, right, central Milwaukee, downtown, and hubs. That's where it lives, right? And so some tiny little spots in other places.
Yeah.
But really the focus is here and the hubs. And so they are all kind of tied together. Yeah. And we may even be able to, I mean, we haven't gotten into the details of it yet, but we may even be able to do an RHD study with a subcomponent of some economic analysis, possibly as part of a 2040 grant. That is like, I was gonna sit down and talk with those folks and see, because I think that would be within the wheelhouse of things that they would be interested in funding. So there's some opportunity there for some overlap and funding opportunity.
Question, did the tier 2 include the residential high density thing?
Tier,
Because that has to be done anyways, right? The
It has-
residential-
Well, remember, the tiers are just the level of effort. But this is the order that we're doing is residential high-density zone. It's like we're flipping them almost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Starting with the hard one.
Yeah, we're starting with the hard one, starting with the highest level of effort in the order that we're doing them.
So like, obviously, you want to try to do the most you can, but this raises a question on capacity right now. And then what do we, we're doing this, right?
Yeah.
Because this is gonna, and I talked to him about this earlier this morning, I know it's gonna reprioritize things. And I think we need to know, like, what is this, like, if we were to do tier 3, because that's the heavier lift, what would that set aside and reprioritize in other
Well, let's
areas?
take a little look-see. Okay, so let's see, what have you got? I did prepare just a couple of high-level slides, so we can take a look at this, okay? So basically, just trying to give you all an idea, right, of what, you see what's going on, what's underway. We've got the TSP, right, that's underway. We should hopefully get through that by the end of the fall. That's my hope, keeping my fingers crossed. We've got the Natural Resources Code. Brett's been working on that for a long time. He kind of like got sidelined because of the whole FEMA thing, so that's coming back to you all. We're coming back in April to talk about that. We are working, and so the things that you see in bold are the things that we're required to do as part of our HPS strategy. So we are already working on the affordable housing incentives. We are thinking that we're going to be able to come back on March 18th. We've got the next round for that, so we're looking forward to talking to you all about that. There were 2 items that were in the work plan originally, in this order. This is in order, and I'm going to tell you. So the potential parks institution zone and Willamette Greenway, that's been on the planning department's work plan for a long time, since I've been coming and talking to you all about this, right? So when I have a check underway for the parks and institution zone, that's because we have done a lot of work behind the scenes to try to understand what that really means and what would be required, what would be necessary for us to take a look at that. And just to be clear, that came straight out of the comprehensive plan. Okay, so that was a directive out of the comprehensive plan. When we really got into it, and we have assessed, and we talked about this last time a little bit, Mayor Beatty, I think that you concurred a little bit, that the idea behind it was that, and this is what I understand from the comp plan process, is that our comp plan map usually has a corresponding zoning map, right? And for all of the zones, we have a comp plan designation that's something pretty similar in the zoning map. The one place where we don't have that is we have a public zone in the zoning map, but we don't really have a parks public zone in our comp plan map. So those So parks and schools in particular always have to go through a conditional, community service use. Yeah, sorry. And so there was this idea of whether or not there would be value into establishing some sort of process in which schools and or parks could have a zoning designation with zoning standards that would make it easier for them to go through the process. The thing that we uncovered through that, and I'll try not to get too in the weeds, but with schools already have standards in our code in which they need to adhere to go through a CSU process. So there already are those standards. Parks don't have those standards right now. And so, but parks concept plans do go through the community service use standard. But there's really not a lot of good rules around how that happens. So it's a little confusing. All that to be said is that this is something that I do believe has value, the exercise itself, but I don't know that it has a high value with all of the other priorities that we have heard coming out of City Council. I think that it's primarily an exercise in a code audit and evaluation, and then because we don't have a lot of new parks and we don't have a lot of new schools, I don't think we need to blow up our code and it's a really technical analysis, and I don't know really what we get from it. So as far as we've come to the conclusion, we feel like someday we're gonna keep it on our work plan, and if nobody's really doing much of anything else, then we would do this because it's a valuable task. We always have so many things to do. I don't know when we'll get to them, so there's one. And then two, Willamette Greenway. And it was funny because I think I did make a pitch for this last time and felt like we really needed to do it. But as I've dug into it a little bit more and understood the nuance of it a little bit more, I actually don't think that about doing the analysis of the Willamette Greenway right now is also a high priority. Came straight out of the comp plan. It says, let's look at this. Let's look at the boundaries. Right now, all development that comes in that's in the Willamette River Greenway has to go through a type 3 process.
It's either exempt or it's a type 3.
Or it's a type 3. Since I've been here, I think we've had 2 maybe that have had to go through a type 3 with the Planning Commission. It wasn't difficult. We got them through the process quickly. So I feel like, again, this is a valuable thing that could be done if the city did not have other higher priorities.
Well, and the Willamette Greenway, I've been through at least 2 cycles of Willamette Greenway between my time on planning and council. So it's been touched.
Yeah, it has been touched many times. And so I think, and you brought up this point last time, Mayor Beatty, and I completely concur. So you can see I've italicized those, saying like, those were on the original work plan in the original order, but I think that we could move them down if the council agrees with that. Then the next thing is that, let's see, we've got the RHD, we have to do that HPS, that's required. Now, the little blue things are the things that I've added in here that are based on hubs, because I've had a placeholder for hubs for a long time, for, I don't know, last 2 years or something like that. So those things scope the 32nd Avenue and King Road, and then the marketing temporary use. Like I said, the scoping thing, that's something you all need to decide whether or not you want us to, move forward with. And then the marketing, we can do that in the background. That's like a humming project in the background, okay? So then, oh, sorry.
No.
Oh, right, I was getting ready to change the slide on my computer. Like, let me do that for you. Then the other thing that somehow, and I apologize for this next work item was not actually included in the last work plan. I overlooked it, but it is in our HPS, okay? So we're actually required to look at this, to look at STCs and to look at planning phase as part of our HPS. Now, so that is something that we need to do, and we said that we were going to start that process in 2025. The good news is that there's a whole conversation that is going on about STCs within the engineering department. We have also recognized that from a planning piece perspective, this is kind of sits in both camps, is that 1, our fees are incredibly low compared to other cities. 2, do we want to raise them because we're concerned about affordability? I don't know. We need to have that conversation. So that is something that that is on the work plan now, and we need to be moving on that. And then I put this other thing, which is in italics, but also about unknown state requirements, because every single year we're getting a lot of stuff. And I think we're going to get a lot of stuff that are going to come out of this governor's bill coming up. And so that's a wait and see. Let's see what's going to happen. So don't know what's going to happen there, which kind of throws everything else off. But I do think actually it might impact this pre-approved plan set strategy that we have identified in the HPS as well. Because from what I understand, there are talks about developing these plan sets and then just across the state, allowing them by right. So I don't know the details. It hasn't all gotten worked out yet. So that is something that I'm kind of like, I don't want to jump deep into the pre-approved plan set work until I understand what's going to come out of the governor's office. But what we said in the HPS is that we would start exploring this in 2025. So I think that we've got a little bit of time. So that would be like later this year.
I'm sorry, before you go on.
Yeah.
The one about reducing SDCs or planning fees, is that for affordable housing or is that just generally? Because I think we need to be looking at raising it.
I agree, Mary Verity. And that's what I was just saying. I was like, that's in our HPS. So
Remember, these are, and whatever's in HPS is just what we have to explore. It doesn't mean we have to do.
Okay.
So we said, we've heard over the many, many years, probably forever, reducing SDCs would be really help developers of all kinds, certainly affordable housing developers. So that's why it's there. But again, if it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, then we certainly can tell the state, sorry, it didn't make sense for us.
we may explore it and say, we actually really need to bring
We're sending
some of our
money.
fees. We are learning that we have some of the lowest planning fees in the region. We do. We're learning. So then the next couple of things that are out and haven't even started thinking about them, that are in the order that they've always been, is the town center plan, and now I'm calling it the climate friendly area plan, because it's really, the town center is really the CFA, which has been designated by the state, which is also designated, we're designated as the town center in the 2040 plan. So does that make sense? They're a little-
How does, what are some of the components of what that will include? I still don't understand what CFAC is asking y'all.
I don't know yet either.
Okay.
We're doing a lot of what CFAC is asking us to do already. I think that one of the things that's interesting that I keep kind of stumbling back around is that our adopted town center boundary, which we've had since, 1997? I believe it's 1997. We were originally going to be a regional center. That's what we originally started out as in 1995. And everybody's like, whoa. We're not sure we're going to be a regional center. So let's tone that down to be a town center. So we've had that boundary for a really long time. And now the state is really focused, like our TSP work is focused a lot around our town center boundary because of the new rules with the transportation system planning, right?
And is the town center just downtown?
No, that's the thing. The town center is much bigger than folks probably think it is. It's actually central Milwaukie.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is much bigger, I think, than people realize it is. The good news is that I think that a lot of and so Metro, and we've talked about this before, everybody, is Metro they're gonna do an update to their, whatever they're gonna call it, the 2080 plan or whatever it's gonna be. But they're not gonna do that for a little while. So, but then the state is also gonna be maybe asking us to do some things in our town center that we aren't aware of now. I don't know that yet.
And I guess why I ask this is that RHD work that's happening in our town?
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
30% of our,
It actually, the work that we are going to be doing through the RHD work is actually really great work to start informing this when we get to it. We're a ways out from this at this point. But so that is the next item. Then the next item was the historic resources update. And then we had looking at the BI, the manufacturing zones, and the UGMA. Those were the things that we've had on the work plan. So you can see how we're trying to squeeze some things in. HPS is really taking up the majority of our work plan at the moment because that's state requirements, so.
can I clarify, the one HPS thing that I don't see is developing a land banking strategy and partnerships to support affordable housing development.
That is in our strategies. That is not a planning
Okay.
piece. So we do need to be doing that, but that is something that we can roll into potentially the RHD study, which I think would be great.
So one of the reasons that's in there is because the city started this land banking idea years ago with Councilor Faulkner at the time. And so there was some dedicated funding every year that would go into a pot of pool, and we'd use it, well, the only thing we used it on was buying the auxiliary lot for Sparrow. So Sparrow is a land banking opportunity. So I would say that we have been doing land banking for a couple years now, but expanding it, we'll need to start talking about revenue streams. We have a conversation about CET in a few weeks, so.
So when we talk about a more robust land banking strategy, it's not necessarily planner work turning to you. What? Oh, that's all.
So yeah, that's the order of events at the moment. Yes.
Explain UGMA, what you're doing in our UGMA necessarily.
We had this exact same conversation last time, didn't we?
Okay.
It's really our agreement with the county, right? And so looking at in the unincorporated areas that are in our planning area, they're designated as our planning areas, but the county still has the authority to do the planning there.
Yeah.
So there's a question of whether, when I first got here, there was a conversation about whether or not we should be updating the agreement with the county. And started down that path and then kind of realized that there wasn't the political environment to kind of do the work. And then also there's a lot of questions about like, what will we get out of the work? Because we as a city haven't really had an active, it's really about an active annexation policy. We've not had an active annexation policy since I've been here. And I don't know that the council has talked about wanting to do that, but I would think that it's an exercise. It's a really good exercise to do. I like to have things up to date. It's a valuable thing to do. At the end of the day, we're kind of functioning all right. And unless we want to make some changes to the way we're doing things with how we're interacting with our annexation policies with the county, it's not a necessary thing. And we have all of these other things that need to be happening ahead of that. So it's still on there.
On that, I would say, Laura's predecessor and Justin did have meetings with the county at one point about updating it. I remember getting a red line version at one point. I would agree, it's not a high priority, except that, and I don't know that we have to have a new UGMA. So I will say what a lot of the cities would like to have from the county is an agreement to make properties on their border annex when they redevelop. Like right now, we only can do that because of sewage.
Yeah.
But a lot of the cities, I hear this from Lake Oswego, other cities, feel like properties that redevelop on their borders should have to annex. And we have those big farm parcels next to the Linwood neighborhood. And I would not, and like we have there's the greenhouse parcel that's not contiguous to our border, but it's only 5 blocks outside of our border. That's redeveloping and not annexing to the city. I do feel like we want to be proactive when these things annex, when these things redevelop. I don't know that updating the UGMA is necessary to that. I think just having some conversations with the county and maybe.
Could that be part of a land banking strategy too? I mean, banking potential future property and.
I know we
I mean, I think.
Annexation goal, so.
I mean, who knows? I hear all kinds of rumors about where that property's going when the last remaining owner passes.
You're talking about is it the Maplehurst property?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that giant?
Yeah. We had people come in and kick the tires on that.
Do you?
We did recently, and then we were all gonna get together and talk about it, and then it just didn't take precedent because and then nothing happened because, they just didn't. And I think it's even trickier now because the county actually has, you can do a lot more in the county that you used to be able to do. It's like, it used to be you could, say, but you can do this over here, but now they can do all those things in the county too, so it makes it a little bit harder. And it's a tricky nut to crack, because I think we made some trade-offs with the Carragino farm property. And it's like, do you want to make concessions in order to bring them in? So it's a larger conversation about like, it's some sort of development agreement and what that might look like. And so if we ever got some real people kicking the tires, then we would want to have like another conversation about what that might look like, because that was a council choice on what we were willing to give up, right? Was the property tax.
Right.
Yeah, for 10
And
years.
I mean, I do.
There's trade-offs.
So I do, I don't know that the UGMA agreement itself is so important, but I do feel like we ought to be having some conversations with the county, and you can count me in to participate if you want to schedule. Because I would really hate to see that redevelop and not be
The big one.
There's an opportunity there for a better Fernberg Park and et cetera. So,
So I guess the question for council is kind of the approach that we've put forward here. Is that an approach that you all are comfortable with? And if that is, then we have our marching orders and we will start moving forward with kind of the order that I presented here.
so you didn't give us times on the things on the list.
Listen, no.
But I will say, about 17 months ago, you told us you'd be starting historic inventory about now.
That's the thing is I would love to start it. Trust me, that's just not the way it seems to work. That's why I was like, I'm not going to put any dates up here because with all of the things that come down the pike that we have to do, and then don't forget all of the development stuff that comes in, we also have to do beyond all of this. And so I can give you dates. They'll slide, and I do my best. Like we are constantly like, it's like I'm already talking to Brett. Natural Resources is going to get adopted. I'm already like, you're gonna be working on that fee schedule, Brett. I told him that today. So we're always constantly thinking ahead of like what the next thing and trying to move things as fast as we can. But I think we all know that things just move more slowly than we would like them to. If there weren't all the other factors at play, I would be right on schedule.
So in my book, because everything has slid so far and we have new requirements coming in, I do think you need to do residential high density. I do not think scoping and King Road market analysis should be that high on the list. I think it should come after other things personally, especially if that's a large planning time. So.
Yeah, that's all. Well, the scoping, I guess, is one thing, but yeah, the work is another.
Yeah, the work is another thing.
So the scoping on that would be internal staff time, and then you'd go out to bid for a consultant that would execute the scope.
We try to get a grant and then we would get a consultant that would do the work.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a 2-year project from start to finish.
I mean, the Metro 2040 grants are a big lift, especially if you're in competition with other cities in the region. I don't know if there are a lot of cities in Clackamas County that are applying for Metro 2040, or if the county's applying.
I don't know. I think we would have a pretty decent shot. I feel like some of the bigger cities apply more, like Beaverton, Hillsborough, they get grants. I think that Metro might want to be supportive of smaller cities in doing some planning work with the 2040 money. And the good thing is that it went from being like on a yearly cycle to a quarterly cycle. So we have more opportunities. So when we're ready, we can apply.
Yeah.
Instead of having to wait for them to be,
They're also really open to having Metro staff participate in internal discussions to think about how you get queued up to be a successful applicant. So
yeah,
it might, I mean, if you haven't already,
Yep.
Involved somebody, maybe even in the scoping process.
Totally.
Yes, that
Yeah.
would be a big benefit. And I mean, Mayor, maybe it's because I live closer to that particular corridor that one sticks out for me, but, I think that there are certain things that we can control for and certain things that we can't, and it seems like that area is really, it's really growing, it's really expanding, and I guess, the housing density information that you shared about that area just kind of solidified the anecdotal feel that I have there. So it seems like there's a lot of potential, and I think with the investments we have on King Road, it makes sense, to have that kind of cohesive strategy that we're actually ahead of the development and being more planful about what happens in that area. So that one would be, that one for me might rank higher than for you.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about not getting to things that are, that are not being gotten to for 40 years. We have a 40-year-old housing inventory.
Yeah.
Code.
No, I understand that. I also see that the market is moving with or without us in that area, and it seems like there would be benefit.
Well, and I
for
think
us
that's why I think the residential high density is excellent, because, and I mean, if we see an upgrade of, around those two hubs, I mean, we have two existing hubs. We don't call them hubs, but they are two existing hubs there. But I don't know about studying all the area in between. I mean, I think the residential high density is is awesome because that will hopefully support more vibrancy there. But I don't know about spending effort on studying the area in between. I mean, I think that might be something to do. I think it's a 5 years out kind of thing to do.
I guess I hear from people who live within the area in between. And I hear an interest to have that part of our city be represented in our forward planning. But I mean, I think that's also like, because I live closer to it, because I know people that are in that area, and because part of the neighborhood association work that we did in Llewellyn actually surveyed folks that lived in that corridor and around the Stanley area. And so they were really vocal, not just about their transportation needs, but we offered an area at the end of the survey that said, you know, are there other things that you want to share that are your priorities? And so there were a lot of, you know, things about walkability and wanting to have a more kind of vibrant community. So those stick with me. Those are anecdotes, yeah, but until we have a quantitative study to overturn it, those are my data sets.
I just want to do a time check. It's 6, and I think we do kind of need to kind of find out where everyone's at on this.
Well, I also want to give Mr. Aschenbrenner a chance to talk if he's wanting to talk. Since we gave other people a chance to talk at this meeting.
I wasn't planning on saying anything. Right off the
Well,
top
you
of
can
my
come
head.
back at 6:30 as well and talk.
My concern is.
Well, come up to the table, please, and get the microphone.
If you're gonna do it, you gotta do it properly.
We don't normally, as you know, we don't normally take this from work session, but we broke that protocol today, so we're.
This is the order they're suggesting doing it as you search for it.
So identify yourself.
Dave Aschenbrenner, I live in the Hector Campbell neighborhood. Also wear several other hats, which I'm trying not to wear tonight. I'm concerned about what you're looking to scope on King Road between the two hubs. Is it a scope to add more density along there? And the other part that I have about the King Road thing is we are in the process of rebuilding King Road with narrower lanes, dividers in the middle, more crossings. We haven't even found what impact that's gonna have because we're seeing traffic now backing up to Stanley in the evenings at Linwood. And we're also seeing that traffic backing up on Railroad in the evenings and in the mornings, but that's a whole nother thing with cut through traffic. So there is some concern about making sure that we do preserve our historic houses and our historic buildings before they get torn down for something else. And without knowing what's there and knowing that there are people willing to help work on that, I hate seeing it keep slipping down the line. So I just know that would be one thing. I know that there are people that are looking at that and wanting to know, why does it keep slipping? Where is our historic housing? What's out there? And what still can be preserved as opposed to, you know, well, there's no designation, let's just get rid of it. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. And I'd be willing to sit down and talk anytime with staff. I'm retired now, so I got lots of time.
Thank you.
I will say, when I think about this in sequencing, first, I think there is real an opportunity, like you were saying, sequence this right. You spoke, staff, about how the RHD kind of follows the corridor and these two things happen together. That market analysis of what economic development looks like outside of just the downtown, I think is an important conversation to have. And it's one that I heard from a lot of neighborhoods how important it is. We're putting a lot into our downtown. And if we don't have any focus on our neighborhoods, I think a lot of neighborhoods are going to feel left behind. And I've talked to folks like Andy Fisher, who talks about how if we allow development to go forward without a plan, we kind of allow the developers to take the front seat. So how do we think about having a city-led process? I think that corridor study and scoping that is a good way to do it. And if we can get Metro to pay for it, I'm happy. The second thing that I think about is kind of related to what we lose. It looks like it might be the case that the historic resources goes a little bit down lower and might happen a year later than we would anticipate. I will say, as I've been knocking doors a lot this last year, historic preservation is not necessarily something that I hear on many doors. I hear people talking about how they want to live in a more walkable community. I hear talk about how they want to live in a more affordable community, how people want to see really themselves able to exist in Milwaukee. And I think that historic work is really valuable, but that's kind of a cherry on the top. There has to be some foundation of economic development, anti-gentrification work, really work to make sure that our city maintains its affordability and continues to grow in an appropriate way that we have to get to now. And then I think, like the plan says, we can get to that historic preservation work, we can get to the town center work and all those other things that aren't required by state law.
How does the market analysis do all that, though?
Yeah, I think the market analysis takes what we learn in the RH.
What does it entail, is what I'm trying to say. What entails the market? Like, what are we, market analysis of what?
We're trying to understand what would need to happen as far as our density and our transportation improvements and anything else that we haven't thought of that would need to happen to make those areas around the hubs, the 132nd Avenue, because it's been zoned and mixed use, neighborhood mixed use since 2015, and nothing has happened. So whatever we're doing isn't working. So we need to figure out what to do to make that work. And so that's one study. And then the other part is the King Road corridor, right? And so there's been a conversation amongst this group, amongst other folks, of whether or not we should be studying the zoning all along that corridor in order to take it, really also, it builds upon investments that we're making. We're making transportation investments along that corridor. You really want your biggest and highest, best transportation improvements to support higher density, which has more walking, more people can walk to use those things. Anyway, so the idea was that you've got a hub here and you've got a hub here, but you've got single family in between. But there's a real opportunity for the future, not now. I mean, we're looking 20 years out to take advantage of some of the investments that we're making and have higher density there. So you have more people that are there that can support the commercial activity in the center of.
But you just talked about walkability, and we are investing in walkability in a big way on King Road, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully eventually on Stanley, How do you study? I mean, shouldn't that project be done before we start doing a market analysis? Shouldn't that be project in? Because if we're going to study what's feasible or what's potential, what that road is going to look like at the end of the project is going to impact that. If we're already having traffic backups, what are the traffic throughputs going to be? All of that is, I think, it seems to be like we ought to finish the King Road project and then talk about.
I think what you just highlighted is exactly what makes it a project of regional significance. I think that's why Metro would invest in that area. I think exactly for the reasons that.
Well, then should we be doing a project there, a road project there, or should we be waiting?
I think so. I mean, we're doing a road project there because we're meeting specific needs. TriMet is expanding service because it's meeting specific needs. We have hubs because we want to meet specific needs, but there are certain pieces of this that are not as catalytic. And I think from a Metro perspective, I try not to speak for Metro, but I would imagine if I were in their shoes, I would be saying there are investments being made. I mean, it's a big deal if TriMet's investing on more frequent service. It's because they see that that's an area that is going to need more public transportation. It's going to expand. It's going to grow. And to your point, Council President, we need to do that in a thoughtful way. If we can get support from Metro to do that, and they feel that this is a significant project, which I think, from my limited time at the C4 tables, I would say that TriMet would agree. But it seems like this is a good opportunity. And I think that, honestly, plans in local government take forever. So if you've got one plan going and you're going to queue up the other one, let's overlap as much as possible so that we can just
you know, meet the needs of people who are living in our community.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't, what if we put that off until the historic preservation was done? Doesn't mean we won't do it, just means we won't do it now.
Yeah, we would,
Because the grant's not till 2040.
No.
no, that's the name of the plan, sorry.
Okay, because I was gonna say, like, we do all this,
Yeah.
but, and it's, if it's something that we're planning for 20 years down the line potentially, I mean, don't you think another market analysis would probably need to be done in 10? Because the market's gonna change, I mean, what we're looking at, it's gonna change, and especially with the construction going on there right now too, I would think we'd wanna wait till all that gets done, because that's gonna change.
Analysis is gonna change if we're successful with our residential high density, right?
I mean, that's what the market analysis is responding to, and especially concerns that I think what is outstanding is we have not seen any development in our NMU. It is not, when people envision a hub, it is not what our NMU is right now. That's something that we've heard constantly. The point of the market analysis is really to say, what can we do to make our hubs actually hubs? And if we delay that work by 5 years, we delay making hubs a thing for 5 years.
See, I
And
think
so-
doing the residential high density will potentially activate our hubs. And I think if the way you guys are talking about market analysis seems to assume an upzoning of King Road. And I think that is a bigger conversation that the community needs to have. I'm
Yeah, that would
okay
be part of
with
the
single
conversation.
family.
That's part of the conversation as to whether or not the community would be wanting to. We would talk about that with Milwaukie. Is this something you're interested in seeing?
Well, and again, I think there will be a time for that. I just don't think it is a priority over everything else on your list.
Well, then why don't we do the analysis on 32nd? Since King is still doing the construction, if that might be a concern, we can at least start with 32nd. So there's really not much going on 32nd except for Hillside, but I'm sure that's gonna be, right? So instead of and/or King Road, what if we did 32nd? Or did you kind of want to do this all in one shot? Is that kind of?
We could do it either way.
Is it, I think about economies of scale with the grant. Is it easier to do it in one fell swoop, or is it easier to do in one-offs?
Well, they're two completely different areas too, so.
I don't know the answer to that, really. We'd have to talk to Metro about it
Yeah.
and say like, what do you all think? We've got these two corridors, we're really interested in both of them. Yeah, I think we would have to talk about it a little bit. I do think that doing the RHD does provide a platform, it's a booster to both of those areas because there's a lot. Yeah.
Here's from what people that I've talked to, and I've talked to Andy about it too. Upzoning that corridor is gonna open the floodgates for developers and all of the market. Right? He's not a big fan of that either. I'd be more inclined to do something like that if the bill passes for the condos. The condo bill passes, and because now we're creating more ownership opportunities in multifamily structures, right? It's not just a bunch of market rate apartments that keep people in rent for perpetuity.
Well, I think one thing that I think we're confusing here a little bit, we're not saying we're gonna do a study of King, we're not committing to any treatment of
No,
King.
but that's part of, that's part of the analysis, upzoning.
It would be part of the conversation of whether or not
Right.
that would be something that the community would be interested in doing if it turns out that that was something that would help that corridor, which I'm pretty sure the answer is it would.
Yeah.
So, but we wouldn't say that we have an answer or say we would study.
No,
Yeah,
of course not.
yeah.
No, I'm
And
not
so-
saying that. I guess it's a little bit of caution as to what I'm hearing from people, because I've
And it'll
talked to
be
people
really
about
inter-
corridor 2 on King, and there's not a lot of people in my neighborhood that are too jazzed about that.
Yeah.
There's so many factors that they're considering.
Well, that's why I think it's an interesting conversation to have, because we've heard both sides. We don't really know, we haven't talked to the community about it, right? You've had conversations, you've had different conversations, different people are having different conversations. And so we can sit in this room, but until we have like a larger conversation, we don't really know how folks really feel about it. We may do the study and they say, yeah, we're not interested in density.
That's not the market analysis, that's the public outreach piece.
Well, you have to do public outreach in order to understand, we have to test the water, right? You have to see like, here's an idea that we're talking about, let's kick it
So the
around.
market analysis would include a public engagement.
Yes, it would
It would
have to, yeah, it wouldn't just be a market analysis on its own, we would want to have some public conversations about that, yeah. we don't want to just have something that will just sit there. I think it's like, no, let's have the analysis and let's like have a conversation about what people really, how people really feel about what might be required to make that happen. And if folks are good with that or not good with it, we just don't know the answer.
And I think that's why I don't want to presuppose what would happen on King, but I think it's valuable to ask the question of if we want King to be a vibrant commercial area, what would that take and what do residents want to see? That might look 1,000 different ways, but that is really what the market analysis is looking at. There's no one answer that we're going to tell residents we must do, but the question is, do we want to see hub activity? What would that be?
I still think that will be informed by the RHD being complete and the street being complete. And it'll be a more correct, more appropriate time to go into that work, when those things are done.
Well, and we would, I guess the idea is that we would do the RHD and then it's whether or not we're just right on the heels of the RHD. So it's really still the order. Maybe it's not the order, like we're not doing the scoping for it right now, but we're going to get some more information. We're going to do a little bit of the RHD work. And then maybe instead we scope the 32nd and the King, or just 32nd and King. But we do that, we start that conversation in 2026 after the work of the RHD is already underway. So that we're not doing both. So we get the information that we need from the RHD analysis. We use that to build into the scope and we do it in 2026.
The scope would be done, the analysis would be done in 2026?
No, we would scope it.
Scope it.
We would scope
And
it.
seek the funding.
Yeah,
And seek the money, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we would get RHD report back as we're scoping what the hubs would look like, and then we do hubs. So hubs is informed by RHD, and at that point, development would
Well,
have
you
started.
call it hubs, but it's really
Corridors.
Really quarters, yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, I am all for the stuff about activating the existing hub. I'm for the stuff at the bottom. The stuff at the bottom of the page. Yeah, I do think there's some opportunity I do think there are people who don't know, who don't recognize what they can do, or that this is a place that's designated for.
For sure.
Yeah.
There's some work to be done there.
10 minutes.
I know we're
we don't have a
quite
dinner
a
break.
bit over. I still want to make sure I'm getting the clear direction because I've heard from some people and not from others. Are we in consensus that we will proceed with the residential high density? We will wait till the report from that comes back to begin the scoping for the market analysis.
Does that allow for the historic to be done? Or no, that's still gonna have to be.
That's still.
Yeah.
There's still a bunch of things ahead of that anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think we have a conversation when the residential high density comes in.
Okay,
Yeah, we don't have to figure it out, right? We'll do some of that work
we'll
first.
begin with that and we'll begin with the other things on that slide, but we will
Yeah.
hold on doing the market analysis scoping until the RHD work is done.
Yep.
Laura, I haven't heard from you. Around.
We're not doing any hub scoping until
We are doing the
2027.
scoping on the corridor market analyses. We're gonna be doing the other hubs activation work that can include marketing and education and communication and the expansion of the grants. We'll do that
Yeah.
starting this year
Right, but we won't do the scoping
of
on
32nd
the
and
corridor
corridors.
studies until we have the RHD report.
So
26.
2-year delay.
It will be, we probably would start scoping that, I would say at the beginning of next year,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
Probably be beginning of next year, because we've got to scope the RHD, get that work going.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we would start. It's going to be a lift. It's,
Right.
yeah, there's a lot to figure out.
That timeline sounds good to me.
And we may even be able to get Metro to talk about doing a grant for the RHD work too, because it does start to build the foundation for a larger conversation that we want to have. So there may be a possibility there.
Include them sooner than later.
Yes.
Hey, I'm already talking to him.
I mean, if they're already in the process of reworking the, 2040 plan, and they've got all these, I guarantee you, other cities are just lining up.
Yeah.
To apply for new and exciting projects, and if we are not on their radar, then we're gonna miss out.
We are on their radar. I'm talking
We're
to
in the-
them
we're in the-
already.
We're in the queue. We're in the queue already.
We're in the queue.
All right, folks, you got
All right,
7
thank you
minutes.
all.
Never. You don't have to come back.
I do have to make-
We just have to come back and talk.
I have to come back.
Actually, that should be.
We didn't talk.